What I'm going to ask each of you to do here is just give a little background and just anything that you think might be relevant to your initial journey. Try to keep it under 20 minutes. No, I'm kidding. And,
That'll be hard for me.
And then also what I want you to talk about is your first property you bought.
Okay, I'm Jeff Blahnik. I started in real estate. I got licensed in '79 at a place called Westdale Company. And Westdale Company became Westdale Better Homes and Gardens. They were the big gorilla in the marketplace in metropolitan Grand Rapids. They controlled more than 30% of the market. They were never supposed to die. They died. I moved from there to Remax. Remax was a great company. Remax has been supplanted to some extent by a company called Keller Williams. Keller Williams is now being supplanted by a company called EXP. And what I've noticed in the real estate business is we've got a lot of people chasing a company, thinking that company is going to provide my retirement income. And my lesson to everybody in this room would be really simple. Don't chase a company for your retirement plan. Bet on yourself. I started out in a two-family house on Carlton Street by Aquinas College. My wife and I bought it when the market rates were 15 and 16%. We bought it on a land contract at 11%. We thought we'd died and gone to heaven. At that point in time, we had. I'm not the only person standing in this room right now or sitting in this room right now that started out in a two-family house. There's a guy named Greg that did the same thing. From that two-family, my goal was at 24 to have it paid for by the time I was 30, which we did. Ever since I've been 30, my wife and I have not really had a house payment. And that put us in a position to continue to save and invest and buy more real estate, which is what we did. And today, now I'm 65 by the end of next month. I was 24 when I started. My wife and I own 29 doors. We have a total of 4 mortgages. And I set a goal a while back to get my gross rent roll to 50 per month. And by the end of this year, well, I will have achieved that. So that's a real quick synopsis of where I came from and where I am. When I was young, life was very lean. We did not have money. We needed the rent to make that first payment on our first 2-unit. And today, that's not the case. So my advice to everybody in this room, bet on yourself. Don't bet on a company, because just as EXP has supplanted KW, and we've watched some significant agents from KW go to EXP, 5 years down the line, somebody's going to supplant EXP. And so, bet on yourself.
So, Justin?
So I took a different path than probably a lot of people in this room. Went to college for accounting. Straight after that, went to grad school, got my CPA license. I was going to be a tax partner at a big accounting firm. After 7 tax seasons, I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and I was looking for a change. That's when I found 5-Star, and along with that, I started getting exposed to real estate. Now, I had read books, podcasts, I had thought about investing in real estate, but I was just too scared. And then I was talked into buying a house with 3 different partners, one of them being Paul Carlson, and we bought a little house and everything went wrong. A car drove into the front porch, we went over budget on our repairs, we had a poor property manager and poor communication with that property manager, and pretty much everything that I was scared of actually happened, and I realized it wasn't that bad. So after we dealt with all of that, I was able to move forward, and now, right now, as we're standing here, I have 10 different properties. One of them is an Airbnb, and the other are long-term holds. So that was just over the course of 3.5 years or so.
Justin, is that, when you say 10, is that like, Jeff says, he used the term I haven't heard of, but 29 doors. Is that 10 doors?
That's 39 doors.
39 doors total.
Right, so
39 rents coming in.
Correct.
All right, how old are you?
34.
Okay. All right, Jason?
Hi, my name is Jason Schuringa. I've been at 5 Star for 6 years. I think I'm coming up on 7. I got into real estate because I like to build. I worked for construction companies. I have a 4-year business degree. I grew up on a farm, and my dad had a second-generation farm that he was planning on maybe allowing me to buy it from him, to take on the family business, 3rd generation. We had 500,000 chickens. We had 500 acres, and in 2007, he lost it all in the recession. He worked 65 to 70 hours a week on a farm, and he owned real estate, and the market actually took our family's wealth away from us. He had to sell the 500 acres to pay off debts. He had to sell the farm to pay off debts. And what he was able to do is he walked away with a small little nest egg, and it's significantly smaller than you would probably have a goal for yourself or plan for yourself. The point being is, in real estate and in self-employment, we all have opportunities to take risks, to build our retirement in the ways that we want to. It could be an employer matching your 3% contribution to your 401k. In self-employment, we don't really get that option. We have to create that ourselves. We have chosen, my wife and I and our family, to invest in real estate, and in the even smaller category of building a short-term rental portfolio. We have seen that it is a way that we can control our wealth. We can build assets that are cash flowing positively. We own 2 Airbnbs now. We're looking to purchase our 3rd. And we've also Airbnb'd our house. I mean, if we owned a camper, we'd Airbnb a camper. We're like big into short-term rentals, and I think it's wired that way. We just like hosting people. I don't think everyone's wired that way, but that is the way that we have chosen to build our wealth, is by short-term rentals.
So, and how old are you?
31.
Okay, all right. So, that kind of gives you just a little taste of what's possible. And again, I want to make sure too that everybody understands that you, none of you guys were making huge money. Jeff, when you were buying in the very early days, I mean, you probably did not make $100,000 in those early days.
No, not close.
And so I want to be sure that what you don't walk away here is say, well, these guys had lots of money, therefore they could do this. And so I also called up one of our, matter of fact, our #1 agent this year was Carrie Kiefer. And I wanted to find out what her investment strategy has been. I was hoping she could be with us, but because she's done so well in investing, she's actually on the beach down south right now with an umbrella drink someplace. And but Carrie had a few thoughts as well. She started out with a partner. And so when you think about all the different ways that this thing can get rolling, Carrie said she started out with a partner, they both scratched up some money, they went to a bank, they found out what they needed to do, then they borrowed a little bit of money from a couple people, and then they got going. And I think Carrie today owns 8 places free and clear, and she actually, I think she's got she started out flipping. And then what she did is, as she was flipping these things, she didn't sell them outright. She did a lease-to-own deal where people would put 3-4 down, they'd lease it from her, and then if they failed to be able to buy it, they kept the deposit, of course. And then the other thing they did too, when they did it that way, they were also getting maximum price, because when somebody's going to ask for time, you're going to probably get a higher price. So there's so many ways to do this, and I just want to ask a few of you right now in the audience. I want to find, I've always had this thing where to stand up in front of somebody and not know who you're talking to, and I know that you guys are connected with 5 Star Real Estate, but I don't know about your lives and what you've done investing-wise. So I'm going to ask you to help the panel out here so we can kind of see. How many of you own a rental property right now? So if you look at that, you're probably talking about maybe 10 people in the room.
More than that.
How many of you own more than 5? 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4. How many have, of those that you have owned, how many own a duplex, two units? How many bought a single? How many bought a condo? All right. They limit you now at one of those places, don't they?
A couple places have put the Blahnik rule in effect, yes.
Yeah. So, how many of you would like to buy something in 2022?
That
How
should
many
be
of you
everybody.
are afraid to buy something right now because prices have been going? So, for those of you that just raised your hand there, that'll never change, I don't think. There's always gonna be something going on that would cause you to find a way or a reason not to do it. And I guess what I would encourage you to do is to find a way to do it, and get started. You know, interesting, when I think back to the previous crash, which is now becoming history here, and when I say that, I'm talking about I'm gonna use 2006 to 2011. And the big one was 2008 in October when everything went to heck. But it really started in Michigan in '06. And so a lot of people bought in that '03 to '04 range, and they were speculating. They were speculating that values were gonna continue going up. And what was interesting about this time frame is that when we hit the skids, after a couple of years, many people bailed. And they did what we said was foreclosures, short sales, keys for the deed. There were so many different variations of this, but the bottom line was that people gave up. And the reason they gave up is because they lost hope. And the reason they lost hope is because they couldn't see past the current horizon. But the people that held on, what happened to them? They were made whole, and they doubled their money, and maybe even tripled it. And then those people that had money, when it hit, went out, and I could name a few names right now, people that you might know in the Grand Rapids area that went out and begged, borrowed, and stole between 2009 and 2011 to buy everything they could get their hands on because they could buy properties for $20,000, $40,000, $60,000, and they're now all multimillionaires.
Yep.
So there's lots of reasons why not to do it. And so you have to have a plan. And so what I'm hoping to come out of here with today is having these guys talk a little bit more in depth about their plan, of what their thinking was, and they probably could add in their mindset, because there's a mindset to going down this road. There's a mindset to how you approach life. And so I'm going to be very curious to hear what they have to say about how they looked at things. And so with that, Jeff, why don't you give us a little bit of the mindset, and what was it that made you, why? I mean, why didn't you just go out and buy a single family home? Why didn't you just go mind your own business and own one property and do life and keep things simple? And what was it inside of you that drove you down this road?
Well, that's kind of a personal question. Before I get to that answer to that question, I would just suggest one thing to all the people in this room that either have invested or are fearful of investing in real estate. When I first started, I tried to manage my own properties, and I was for shizzle at property management. I understand how to fix things here, none of it transfers to my fingertips. And I had a client, a tenant in one of my rentals. She was 5 months behind. She had 2 little kids. I didn't have the heart to give her notice to quit, to put her out. I should have. It was fair, it was reasonable, but I just could not do that. One of the most important things you can do is get a property manager. They're gonna take all that grief off your plate, and you're not gonna be feeling bad that you evicted somebody because you hired somebody to do it. There's an old saying in life, hire people to do the things they do, and you do what you do. And I'll give you an example. These nice teeth up here, yeah, I didn't put those in, I had a dentist do that. And my hernia surgery, I darn sure didn't do that one either. So hire people to do what you don't do. And most of us, when we first get into owning real estate, one of the difficult things is dealing with tenants. Hire a property manager, case closed. I felt like I had a new lease on life after I got a name from Barry Capel to manage my properties, because then I felt like I could just go out and buy whatever I wanted, when I wanted, and I didn't have to fear about dealing with the tenants or the maintenance. Now, about the mindset. I came up from a very lean place in life. I had a mom and dad who were wonderful parents, hardworking. My dad graduated from the 8th grade and my mother graduated from high school. We had 9 kids in our family. We never had money. You don't take 9 kids on vacation anywhere. You don't take 9 kids out to dinner anywhere when your parents are blue collar. And my parents were dirty blue collar. They weren't GM blue collar or Steelcase blue collar. They were dirty blue collar. And the Syria experience that I had as a kid, I shared this with Greg Carlson probably 20 years ago. And that's the first time I had ever shared it with anybody. We were on a farm in the UP. It was a subsistence existence dairy farm. That meant my parents had a full-time job, both of them off the farm, and then they operated a dairy farm. And we went to Kearney School, K through 12, all in one building. And they were gonna have a bake sale at Kearney School. And Kearney School, way back then, your bake sale consisted of a cupcake, a brownie, a Rice Krispie bar, or maybe a piece of Jasper's maple sugar candy. And I can remember, like yesterday, going into the kitchen in the farmhouse that my dad was born in. And I said to my mom, and I am a naive little shit. That's what I am at that stage. Some people say I'm still pretty naive. I went into the kitchen and I said to my mom, gee, can I have 10 cents for the bake sale tomorrow? And my mother kind of looked at me. She was sitting in a chair in the kitchen, in the country kitchen. And she kind of dropped her head, and then she looked up at me. She stood up, she reached into her jeans pocket, she pulled out a nickel, 2 pennies, and some lint. She looked me square in the face and she said, Jeff, that's all the money we got for the bake sale. And there's Nancy, Susie, Tony, Kathy, and you. Jeff, we don't have any money for the bake sale. And for whatever reason, that just absolutely pierced my soul. I can remember it in living color. It's like I got a great big TV screen right in the front of my expansive forehead, and I can remember it like yesterday, and it still hurts. And that is the mindset I came from. So when I got older, I saved every penny I could. I busted my chops in any job I could get. And when I got into real estate, I realized here was a chance to invest, live within my means, and build assets. And that's what I did.
So and again, I have watched a lot of this with Jeff over the years, and I did not have that experience, but as I think back, what I watched Jeff do, he went different than most of us. Most of us were out the minute we could. We were buying a new car, we were upgrading homes, we were going on trips, and Jeff didn't do any of that. And Jeff always lived beneath his means. And when I say that, and again, remember I started out here and I said no guilt, no shame here, and that's not what this is about. But it is an opportunity for those of you that maybe are trying to live above your means, which means that you would have credit cards, your home isn't paid for, you maybe have some toys that aren't paid for that you financed. And all of those things will potentially stand in the way of you to build this retirement that all of us say we want. And so we don't end up, saying what a realtor said to me the other day, that, they're 60 years old and they don't want to sell homes they don't want to have to sell homes when they're 80. If they would like to, they'd like to be able to, but they don't want to have to. And so, this person was kind of like, I don't know if I can make it up. I don't know how I can get there. And I want to encourage you, if you're 60 years old, there's still time. You can still make changes to better your retirement. Justin, what was your mindset at what would cause you to go ahead and do this?
So, being employed as an accountant before, I'd always invested into my 401k, which was matched by my company. I thought that was quite secure, and it just wasn't growing at the rate that I thought it would be. I saw the calculators. When you're 65, you're going to need X amount of dollars to retire, and I just wasn't getting there at the rate that I was saving. I was also quite frugal. I'd paid off my student loans. I didn't have a car note. I didn't think I was living above my means, but I still just wasn't saving and building wealth as quickly as I hoped. And then when I saw real estate, I saw that as a different form of control that I could have where I didn't have that in the market. So rather than blindly throwing a couple $100 for every paycheck into my 401k, I thought I could really affect change and build wealth this way. So being an accountant, I looked at it a couple different ways. I saw that there was cash flow from rents. I saw that there were tax advantages through depreciation and other advantages that you can take through rental properties, and then also the debt pay down. So not only would the properties pay me every month, I would also be building wealth through the appreciation and debt pay down as well.
Okay, Jason, you kind of went through a little bit, but
I think we're still trying to, I'm only 6 years in real estate. There are people here who are 30 plus years in real estate where you can verbalize why you did, what your goals are, and if you've met your goals, or $50,000 a month that's a high goal. And for 6 years in real estate, that's almost something that's like unattainable. It's something that's really far out there. My real goals that I can only verbalize 6 years into real estate at this point is 15 year in the future. Jason's mad at now Jason for not doing anything. We are showing homes constantly. We are listing homes constantly. We are on the MLS serving clients. We are neighborhood specialists. We are county specialists. Some of us love Northern Michigan. Some of us love just southeast side of Grand Rapids or just East Grand Rapids. We are specialists for our clients in very specific areas, and what that means is we know what a good deal is. We see them. They come across our desk. Somebody needs something. And so to not use all of that knowledge we have as real estate agents for our own personal wealth building, I actually see me later getting mad that I didn't do anything about that. I'm also a fan of leverage. Not everyone needs to be, but lenders allow you to purchase your second home with 10% down. That's how it started. It starts with the second home, your first property. To be able to purchase an appreciating asset that can, getting into what Justin's talking about here for accounting, positively cash flow and appreciate. And even if you did have that loan, now you've got tenants paying down that loan balance. In 15 years, on a 15-year loan, you own an asset, you still have positive cash flow, and your initial investment was 10%. On a $250,000 property, that's $25,000. And so if you put $25,000 now and you're going to turn it into a $400,000 asset in 15 years at 4% appreciation, to not do that seems silly unless you have another plan for retirement, and I had none. I had zero plan for retirement. And so it is real estate, and that's the heart of it, I guess, is you start with one, and I guess I don't have the goals verbalized, but it is to be frugal in the way that you use your money and to own real estate, to own appreciating assets.
So Justin, do you have a number in mind that at this age, do you have a number in mind that you need to generate, like if you wanted to retire at 60? Do you know how much annually you would like to see your investments bring in?
My initial thought was if I could net, after all expenses, $10,000 a month in rent, that would be enough for a comfortable living. Now that's net, that isn't top line rents. So we have the rents, we have any vacancies, there's the property manager, there's repairs and maintenance,
Taxes.
there's CapEx, so a roof, a furnace, taxes, insurance, and anything else that could happen. So after all of that, my initial goal was if I had $10,000 a month, I could have a comfortable retirement.
Either of you guys have a number? I mean, well, you've kind of given a number, but
Yeah.
you're going to be okay.
One of the things about the number that we're talking about is that the number grows with the market. You know, Justin he just said, you know, you buy a house at 250, 15 years out at 4% appreciation, it's 400. That's what you want to look at. You build wealth over time. There's an old guy named Einstein, and he said the value of compounding was the eighth wonder of the world. And he's exactly right. My net worth is a whole lot more than I paid for some of my properties. The place on Carlton that my wife and I started in, we paid $42,000 for. Today, it's worth at least $315,000. And
Do you still own that?
Yes, I do.
All right, well, there's another lesson, by the way. And I think Buffett says this too, but I only buy, I don't sell.
Warren Buffett, if you listen to the old fart from Omaha, Warren Buffett says buy and hold. He's on CNBC periodically, the business news. I would suggest you all watch that in the morning at 6 o'clock, CNBC Business News. Warren Buffett says, we don't buy a company with the idea we're going to flip it in 3 years or sell it in 5 years. We're buying it to own it for 20, 30, 40 years. I invest significantly long term, and the value of that is I have a lot of stuff paid for. Most of what we own is paid for. You know, my gross rent roll by the end of this year will be 50, and just as Justin was saying, I look at, you know, taxes, insurance, maintenance, property management. So if I gross 50, and let's just say 40% is overhead, and it won't be that high, but let's just say it is, that means I've got 30 a month to retire on. And I think we'll squeak by on 30. But I would suggest that for the younger people in here, if you're single or you're just a young couple, you don't have kids, buy a two-family. Live in half, let the tenant make almost all of your house payment. I started my son John on this plan. And then he bought another 2-unit, and then he bought another 2-unit, and then he bought a house, then he bought, you know, he's got 4 2-units and a house. He's 33 years old, and my son John is unique. He has taken a career path that does not pay much. He makes $32,000 a year. He works for Youth for Christ. And the home that he ended up buying had to have a pool because he wanted to be able to have his kids from Union High School come over in the summertime to his pool so he could minister to them. But there's a kid that's not making much money, but with some good direction from dad, got started right and kept going in the right direction. And so the young people in here, buy a two-family. You're not married, or maybe you're married, you don't have kids, you've lived in apartments, what's the difference? Now you just own the apartment building and you got somebody else making your house payment for you and you live for free. Another suggestion I'd give to the younger people especially, but to everybody, and I literally have said at closings and said this to people, I said, why don't you live on his income and take all of her income every month and pay your mortgage down? And in 5 years, your house will be paid for. You'll be 35 years old and you never have a house payment the rest of your life if you don't want one. There are so many ways to skin this cat. There's not a right way or a wrong way, because each of us is doing it somewhat differently. One thing I wish, if I could have a complete do-over, I wish I could buy public storage facilities. Talk about no overhead, very little management, and cash flow up the wazoo. And I'm getting a nod from him. Yeah, I mean, they're just cash cows. They're like a printing machine. You just get to print money every month. I'll stop.
That's right, no, it's good. Either one of you have anything to add in that area?
What was the question, Greg?
I don't remember.
I talked too long, sorry.
Well, alrighty, so what I think where we got off there was, I had asked Jeff about not selling, and he held on. And so I think that, is there anybody else that's done that where you still got your first place that you bought? See, 1, 2, see a few. Anybody tried commercial out there? Okay, Jeff and I tried commercial. It didn't work so well. If we would have taken the money we bought this building over on East Paris 20 years ago, I think we had a couple partners and we paid 1.5 mil. And we just sold it last year for $1 million.
After 20 years.
So needless to say, we kind of wonder, like, we should have just gone out and bought 4 single-family homes, and we would have obviously done a whole lot better. But, so there's so many ways to do this. And so I want to just ask these guys a little bit now about the directions that they've gone. And after this section, I'm going to open it up for questions here. So be thinking about some specific things that you can ask them to pull some things out of them, because you've really got three very different people here. There are some similarities in that they all, I think you'd have to say they probably all focused on deferred gratification. They all focused on living probably beneath their means. They probably all, which also means they probably stayed out of debt, so they paid less interest. I can't say I did any of those things. I was like, Jeff Blahnik probably thought I'd never survive because of the way that I did it. And so I'm not your textbook case like these guys are right now. And so, Jason, I'd like to know more about, you could go out and buy rentals, you can buy doubles, you can buy fourplexes, you can do Airbnb, you can do flips, and you talk a little bit about the flips and the Airbnb thing.
So we flip homes as well. Not many. I would say on average maybe 2 a year. I've probably done around 20 in the last 8 years, where I was either the GC on it or completely in charge of the renovation. Flipping, now only 6 years ago, was fairly easy. You could go on the MLS, you could find a property, you could find something that's got margin, call a couple contractors and they're gonna show up and everybody's happy and everyone made some money. In the last couple of years, I mean, if your dad was an electrician, he's already fired you because he's now only doing new builds. If your uncle was an HVAC guy, I mean, they're making way more money for Eastbrook Homes just doing one after the other after the other. So not only is it really difficult to find contractors that will do things at, I guess I would call it quote unquote moonlighting pricing. So not what they're gonna put on an invoice, but what they're expecting for cash, kind of under the table. It's really hard to find real estate that has margin, good deals, especially on the MLS. Now you're all competing. Tom Zandy and a couple of partners, I think, they ended up, they got one. I think it's a really good flip on the MLS. What was it listed at, 75,000?
Oh, the Logan one or the other one?
Logan.
That was 75.
So it was 75,000. I bid on it, 110,000 with my investor. I said, all right, let's get this. There were 30 plus offers, and it sold for $175,000.
I probably overpaid.
And there's still margin on it, but the mental game of going into a flip right now and going 100,000 over and thinking that there's still margin and knowing that there is and knowing your numbers, that has dramatically decreased the pool of people who flip, and not only the people who flip, but that can turn a profit. So flipping's gotten really difficult, and it's a little bit because of COVID, it's a little bit because of
on the flipping
no
thing,
inventory.
you know, one of the things that we've watched throughout the years is that every now and then, somebody like one of you in this room will walk out of here, and you will decide to either buy a house to flip, or you will get into rentals or whatever. But while you're doing this, you kind of forget to do what got you here. You know what that is? Listing and selling real estate. And so wherever you go in this thinking, you have to remember where your bread gets buttered. And this is the flaw. You know, people go out and start a business, and they quit their job to go start a new business. They take all their investments, they plow it into this thing, they go into a strip mall, and in a year, what happens to them, Vito?
They're gone.
Are they, how many make it in when they,
Yeah, 60-month leases, very rarely do they re-rent after that. I would say less than half.
yeah. So, so the main point I'm making here is that you can't stop doing what you're doing to earn money while you get into these other areas. So the question is, how much time can you allocate? And I don't know, what did you do? I mean, did you work 90 hours a week? Did you, when you were doing flips and selling real estate, how'd you pull that off?
You need to have a very drawn out and written list of priorities. If you're, knee deep in insulation in the attic and your phone rings because somebody wants to look at a house, you better dust off and get out of there. Because everything that you're doing at that flip home is a deferred gratification, hopefully. Hopefully you're gonna sell it. Hopefully your numbers are at where they need to be. But if that person wants to go look at a home, that's your job. And if you start losing those people because something else is taking up your time and your mental capability to be able to do all of those things at once. So I show up to showings, dirty, and that's okay, you're still opening the door. But that is a priority, is my clients, the business, the real estate, the buying, the selling, and the listing. The Airbnbs and the flipping homes, that is, something to fill your time with. Hopefully you have a good work-life balance. I know that Micah and Micah Childress, Dustin Anderson, Todd Anderson, they just put on a really good event at GRAR. I believe it's on their website, for work-life balance, and how we are all really susceptible to work a lot of hours to try to make a lot of money, 60 plus hours. You can't do all of these things. You can't flip homes and do Airbnbs and have a real estate business and have a life balance. It's impossible. So we've chosen tiny ones, flipping 1 or 2 homes a year, trying to add an Airbnb a year. But my clients are my priority.
So, thank you. Justin, talk to us a little bit about, from your CPA mind, what is it about Airbnbs that's got your attention right now?
Right now with Airbnbs, I look at from my CPA mind, the cash on cash return from a long-term rental versus an Airbnb. So my target, what I look to get on a long-term rental, is about 10 to 12% on my cash. So whatever my down payment is and upfront rehabs, I hope to make 10 to 12% a year on that cash.
So you don't look at the actual value, you just look at the cash out?
I look at cash flow and my cash on cash return, what I'm gonna get out of what I invest. That's a long term. I look to get upwards of 20 on an Airbnb, and that is because it's a little bit more intensive for the management. There is messaging back and forth with people who are gonna book. Somebody books and they ask what the Wi-Fi code is, even though you've told them 3 times. Somebody backs up the garbage disposal, just random items where it's a little bit more management intensive. So based off of that, I look to get a little better return. So on certain items for a long-term rental, my property manager will take care of a lot of those things, and I pay for it. But if it's an Airbnb and I'm gonna be dealing with a little bit more, there's more people coming in and out on a monthly basis, the turnover with the cleaners and everything like that, I wanna be compensated a little bit more for my time.
And Jeff, you don't have any Airbnbs, do you?
No, I don't.
Are you looking at anything else right now, in terms of your portfolio?
I think my goal is generally try to add something every year that's paid for. And you know, I look at all of my rentals as pension checks. And I remember talking to one of our agents from Granville named Eric, and I asked him what his plan was. He said, well, I used to start thinking about being in the stock market, he said, but I really didn't understand it well enough, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. So he said, I set my goal to own 15 duplexes. And I said, why 15 duplexes? And his answer was brutally simple. I get a paycheck every day. That's not rocket science. And one of the things I want everybody in this room to understand, and many of you already do, but for those of you that haven't bought into real estate yet, investing in real estate requires the understanding of the math you knew in the 3rd grade. It is addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and percentage. We all knew that by the 3rd grade. It's not trig, it's not calc, it's none of that. It is really simple math. And I think so many times we intimidate ourselves or allow ourselves to be intimidated or don't have enough personal self-confidence to just go and buy that first property. If you are a real estate person, I would share with you the lesson I learned from a guy named Bud Brassick, who's 82 years old. And he pulled me aside when I was a young kid with a head full of curly brown hair and no jowls. And he said, Jeff, invest in something you know, and you know real estate. And Bud is still active today in the real estate market in Grand Rapids. And one of the best pieces of advice I got was from Bud Brassick, invest in what you know. And the advice I would give you, it ain't rocket science. I have not taken as much as a bookkeeping class, and I'm sitting here next to a CPA. And we both managed, and I suspect he's gonna do far better than me in the long haul. And I'm happy for him.
Hey, Justin, you sent this to me, that up there at the top, those are the reasons that you wrote down. Mm-hmm. And then you also said that last statement there. Can you just read those?
So for why I invested in real estate rather than banks or or using banks for the equity market, I like the more control, cash flow, leverage through debt. $100,000 in the stock market is $100,000 in the stock market. For a duplex, if you put $100,000 down, you can get a $400,000 property. So just leverage through that. Appreciation of values. My very first property that I bought by myself in Walker here, I looked it up, it appreciated 62.2% since I bought it in 2018. And I haven't done anything to it except some paint and carpet here and there. So the appreciation is real. And forced appreciation through repairs and maintenance and any improvements. I had a single family property which I bought with the intention to hold it long term. I rented it out for a year, and I had a couple repairs, some paint, minor items, and once the tenants moved out, to get it re-rented. And I looked at comps in the area, and I realized that I could make a margin of about 45% if I put in a new kitchen and just sold it on the MLS. So I adapted and I changed my model just through some forced appreciation and making a couple repairs. So that's something which kind of goes back to my aspect of more control rather than just putting money into the stock market. And then depreciation. Every year you get to write off a non-cash expense and you get to deduct that from your income. So that helps out with your taxes. And then really, real estate is a get-rich-slow scheme. There's nothing flashy or particular exciting about it. It's nothing new. It's not Bitcoin. It's not crypto. It's nothing that's hot right now. It's just a system that's been proven over time to build wealth. And it's something that I think we all understand in this room. And I just think, to me, it's the greatest way to build wealth.
Got a question?
Oh, Tom?
Greg, I wondered if they could speak to whether or not they fly solo, or do they take on partners?
Ah, good question.
Some of the ups and downs of that. I know I own a couple of things, and I have, partners on several of them. I own some by myself, but I'm just kind of curious what they do.
Yeah, Jeff, did you hear that?
Yeah.
I knew that you're, a little older.
Yeah, I fly solo entirely. I like the idea that I'm in control. One piece of advice I give everybody is when you're buying properties, buy size 8s. And what I mean by that is the most commonly bought women's shoe size is a size 8. So when you're buying a size 8, you're buying something that might be entry level or half a step above entry level housing. The reason you want to buy that, if you ever want to sell it, it's gone. It's that easy. You buy duplexes or multifamilies, depending on the market, depending on where financing is and where lenders are, it might be more difficult to get out of those. I'm not saying don't buy duplexes, I own duplexes, but I started with a lot of size 8s. The other thing about that is there's tremendous appreciation at that price point. My wife and I have been buying real estate since I was 23 or 24. We own a lot of real estate, and given the appreciation rates that we've seen this past year, on my balance statement, my valuation, my net worth probably jumped about $1 million. And there's not anybody in this room that can't do that, and especially when I look at the young people in this room, like these two guys and a bunch of guys sitting out here, there's nothing to stop you over the course of time of building a great big snowball. Because when you buy real estate, you start with a little snowball and you're starting to push it downhill. Pretty soon, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's growing of its own volition. I'm not doing anything to make it grow in value. It's just called the market. And so get rich slow is probably a perfect way to put it. And it also allows you to have tremendous control. And it also puts you in a position, especially for the younger people who start like these two guys have, to be in a position at 50 where they can say, I'm not working anymore. Or I'm working only because I want to. And it puts you in a position to do a lot of other things in life. They might both have an eye toward being charitable as they get older, and maybe more charitable than they can afford to be now. That's something that my wife and I do intentionally. We are intentionally charitable. I don't spend everything I make. I invest a lot of what I make, and my wife and I are intentionally charitable. But buy size 8s.
So, Justin, partners.
I had partners in the very first property that I bought, but I haven't in anything I bought since. But
So was that on purpose?
no, that's just kind of the way it's worked out. I'm not opposed to partners, but that's just kind of the way it's been since then. But it's not to say that I'm doing everything by myself. I've had some really great contractors that I've partnered with. I've had other people who I've talked to that have mentored me and have guided me along the way. I see the couple property management companies that I have as great partners. So it's I own them, just my wife and I, but we've had help.
Jason?
In this market, I would always partner on a flip at this point. I don't know, I mean, unless you just got money to burn or money to spend, and you're willing to take on that risk. Partners just get a lot of people involved. You're behind this idea that you're trying to build sweat equity. Airbnb, on the other hand, I don't know if I would ever partner with someone on an Airbnb, only for the fact that the investment is so low. If you are purchasing an investment property, 25% down, 20% down with some PMI, or a second home at 10% down, it's relatively a small investment compared to a flip, which typically you need to buy in cash. and you have to have enough money for renovations, which could be 50, 60, 70, 80,000. To reduce the risk on flips, partnering's great. The Airbnb, I don't think that would make sense.
So, Tom, I'm gonna ask you a question. So, if you were one of these people in the room right now, and you wanted to do something, and you couldn't, you went to the bank, you couldn't get any money, you went to friends, family, wherever, you could only scratch up a few bucks. So would you hold, or would you try to would you opt for the partnering at that moment to get it going?
I guess I'll answer on behalf of one of my young clients. I sold him a house a couple years ago. He met me for coffee. He really wanted to own real estate, and he didn't have any money. They bought a house on his wife's salary, and now he and I own 2 duplexes, and I sold him and his dad a 4-plex. And so he's got 8 doors, and he has no money in it. So it can be done. I think you just have to find people. So that's the reason I brought up the partnership is exactly that.
Yeah.
I have a couple houses with a guy. I have 5 houses with another guy. I have 2 houses with another guy. What I like, and I don't have any property managers except for my commercial stuff. But what I like is most of my partners, all they own is what they have with me. And so they're all in on it. So I have a 9-plex, I don't know any tenants, none of them have my phone number, but my partner runs it, and it's his baby. And so I just think there's some upside to partners.
Yeah.
And I run it differently with all of them,
Yeah.
but I think it's a faster way to get involved.
How do you look at values right now? I mean, we've all seen this thing going straight up like this for the last 10 years, right? And we know that, you know, there's all these things traditionally of, you know, recessions happen, you know, setbacks happen. How do you look at it when you're in a market like this and you're gonna try to buy something in this market? Do you, if you're looking, do you just look at it and say, well, it's long-term, so it really doesn't matter if it drops 10 or 20% in the next year?
See, I was fortunate, like Jeff, that
I was around in 07, 8, 9, 10, and so I bought some of that stuff, and so to me that was awesome opportunity to be long-term. The stuff I'm buying now is just kind of more case by case. I mean, I'm doing more flipping now, didn't do any of that before. But I try not to let it take away from my main thing, which is to sell and list property. But I think too, the thing about partners for me is it's just fun. I mean, I'm doing flips at 8 o'clock at night with a few of my buddies, and it doesn't feel like work. We're just having a great time. So I'm not buying very many long-term holds right now because I feel like I'm buying at kind of the high part of the market. So I'm just buying selective opportunities. And I'm selling a few, to be honest. I feel like we've got this opportunity. We're all starving for listings. So I'm trying to do my part in selling a few every year the last couple of years too.
Appreciate it.
I've got a question, Paul.
Yeah.
This one's for Jeff. Sorry, Jeff. I've heard you say multiple times when people say the market's out, this is kind of on the tail end of what you just said about feeling like you're at an all-time high price point. I've heard you say to people that you buy in any market no matter what's going on. Is that true?
That's pretty much the case. Now, I'm careful. I'm not just going out and buying willy-nilly, but I think I'm looking at the market, I'm looking at supply and demand, and we understand supply and demand. We aren't going to have enough supply for the next 3, 4, 5 years, especially for the next 2 to 3 years in particular. So if you buy something now, you're probably looking at another 14, 15% appreciation next year in 22. You're probably looking at the same thing in 23. The builders can't keep up with growing population. And Kent and Ottawa County are kind of the shining city on the hill. We have growing industry, growing job opportunity. We have people moving into Kent and Ottawa County. And we also have that thing called household formation. Household formation is these young guys finishing college, out a few years, getting married, and wanting a house. And so we have tremendous household formation, which is normal household formation, but we also have population growth. And the builders can't keep up with the demand, no matter what they do. And so there's gonna be a very short supply and a very high demand. I've thought, like Tom, I've thought about selling a few things, and then I sit there and think, well, I could sell it, and what am I gonna do with my money? What am I gonna buy? I don't wanna put in the stock market.
I've got some ideas.
Of course you do. But you know, so me, have I thought about taking some off the table? Yeah, I have. I mean, I bought a bunch of stuff when the market was crushed, and I'm up 200%, 250% on some of these very modest investments. And everything I buy is in a good neighborhood. I don't go into tough neighborhoods. That's just my preference. There are other people that will go into tough neighborhoods and they make it work and they make a lot of money.
Any thoughts?
With just kind of thinking about where values are at and selling, what I've done with a couple properties is I've seen an opportunity to sell one property and use the proceeds from that to buy two, so to keep building. So not everything, I guess I don't think that the values where they're at right now, I've seen that as a way to kind of play Monopoly and just get a couple houses and get to a hotel and just do more units and build that way. Because with values where they're at, I haven't been able to always save up down payments or come up with the cash, so that was another way to build.
So I would like to open it up and have you guys be able to ask any questions. Paul's got a mic back here. If you can't, if we can't hear you, please wait and we'll get you a mic.
I got a comment and two questions. One of my comments is, I always look at the rental income as a 401k. You can't touch it. It's not personal expenditure money. So once you buy something and the rental income coming in, it's there forever until you retire. I think that's an issue with people is they take away from selling real estate and then they start doing rentals and they start using the rental income as their personal expenditures, and now they can't buy any more rental properties. So it's a long-term play. It's a long-term strategy. Question for Jeff, and then another one for all of you. Jeff, can you explain buying properties through an IRA? And then my second question would be, do you guys like to leverage your properties, purchase it, refinance all the cash you can and buy something else, or are you more the strategy of paying it down?
Okay, buying real estate in a real estate IRA. I used to have a bunch of money in Wall Street, and it would go up and then it would get crushed. Then it would go up and then it would get crushed. The last time it got crushed, it cost me something in the vicinity of $500,000 or $600,000. And for a couple of weeks, I couldn't quite fill my lungs with air because that was a lot of money to me. I came from a very lean place in life, and to lose that much money on Wall Street just absolutely sucked the air out of my lungs. After it recovered, I moved a bunch of my money out of Wall Street into a real estate IRA. Self-directed, SEP plan, self-employed program. I took the cash, I bought a unit. I wanted to try it. It worked wonderfully. I have a property manager, they take care of the management, insurance, taxes, maintenance, everything. I have a net check going into my retirement plan every month. So I bought another one, and another one, and another one. And I think I've got 14 doors in my real estate IRA. That means I have 14 checks, net checks, going into my real estate IRA every month. I'm not working for. I'm not feeding my IRA that money. It just is there every month. So a real estate IRA can be nice because it's all tax deferred. Eventually, when I pull stuff out, I'll have to pay tax. But it just like it's a snowball going downhill every month. $8,000 or $9,000 or $10,000 of value growth in my account, and then at the end of the year, I make a contribution, which is typically about 40, 45, and I go buy another property. So that's how real estate IRA works. I don't tell everybody to do it, but I think it's a good way to buy real estate, not have to deal with a lot of taxes on it, and let it appreciate and roll. So if you're young and you do that, it's going to appreciate and roll for a long time. So I think that's good. Your second question, I'm 65 next month. I'm not inclined toward debt, probably because of my experience as a child of being poor. And so I'm not going out and leveraging, although I don't think leverage is a bad thing. I think when you can borrow money even at 4 or 5%, You know, if property's gonna appreciate 4 or 5%, or in this market, 10 or 15%, leverage is fine. I'm not inclined toward it because of my psychology. A smart accountant will tell you that leveraging is very smart to do, and I'll bet that's his answer.
I've leveraged on a couple different properties, and I've refinanced and pulled money out. But what I've also looked at too was loans that I got a couple years ago, which had higher interest rates. And if I could just refinance at a lower interest rate, which I've found is my monthly payment doesn't change but $30 a month, and you can pull a chunk of money out and buy another property. So I've done that, but I'm also very careful not to over leverage because that just makes me nervous.
I've never leveraged an investment property yet. The loan officers only let you take up to 75% of that value out, and investment rates jumped like massively a couple weeks ago, and they don't really see that they're going down. I think it's at 4.5% to take out like a cash out refinance on an investment property.
That's massive.
Well, what I was going to say, to segue, a HELOC right now that I have on my house is 2.5%. And so I don't need to leverage my investment property if I can leverage my primary residence. And that's free money. That is really accessible cash. So leveraging investment properties is a different conversation, I think, compared to leveraging your primary residence. I think there's a time and a place. And you know, the rules are in place. They don't let you take up to 90% of that value out of an investment property. But the accounting needs to be very wise, and it needs to be cash flowing positively, and it needs to have a track record to be doing that before you're taking money out of your investment.
He's coming behind you.
Jason, can you just speak to managing Airbnb? So you got a couple now. I know you've got some that are up north and stuff. So who are you using to do that stuff that's not local, and what's been your experience? Because, you know, all kinds of investors are now, or young folks are like, I want to buy a second home and Airbnb it. So can you just really speak to the rubber hits the road truth of managing these, and especially what it means to do it, you know, up north?
Yeah, so there's a couple different types of people who Airbnb. There's our clients who want to buy a second home, and then there are people who want to build a portfolio and run a business. Two very, very separate people. I'd like to kind of talk about the building the portfolio client, not the client who's building a second home, who just wants a vacation property and they want to loosely rent it. When you are going into it with a lens of building an Airbnb business, you're going to rent that property out for around 180 days a year. That is the holy grail number. You get an easy 90 in the summer, 3 months. You get a really easy 120 because you get these edge seasons. Hopefully your property has summer activities. That's one of those things that you want to have in Michigan. We don't have mountains, we don't have ski hills, we have lakes, we have rivers. You need to be close to one of those things. So you're at 120 days that it's gonna be booked solid. So what does that mean? For 120 days, you have high turnover on this property. You have people staying there for 3 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, and they could be messaging you things like, hey, your blender doesn't work. Hey, the paddle boat broke. Can you get us some more towels? At our Airbnbs, we have people who live either on the lake or near the lake who are our quote-unquote handymen, and we pay them $20 an hour cash to go do things so that we don't need to drive up north. We have a cleaner who she cleans 4 total Airbnbs now, but she gets what it means to clean an Airbnb. We don't communicate with them. So the handyman and the cleaner, Airbnb is really cool. It's actually all on our phone now. It's all mobile apped. They can see the schedules and they know when they need to do a job. And so we don't communicate with them. They communicate with us if they see that something's wrong, if they see that something's broke, which does then enter into a security deposit question with those tenants. We have rented out, I think we're over 1,000 days now, 1,000 stays Since we started with these 2 Airbnbs, we have never claimed a single security deposit. We have never had a party that was like, cops got called in the middle of the night, we gotta run up there and shut it down. There's a way to make short-term rentals family-focused. If you're going to buy a house and put it up for $100 a night that can sleep 20 people, you're asking for a party. You're asking for something to happen that you don't want to happen. And so we have seen by increasing rents, by putting pack-and-plays in the rooms, by making it kid-friendly with baby gates, by having sandy beaches that you can walk down to, by buying properties that's, it's not a 10-foot drop-off with the water, so that, your child can be in the water in a shallow area. It's all this business plan to create an environment that rents to families where you don't have problems and where you don't need to be constantly on your phone, constantly dealing with issues. There's a right way to do it, and I think that there's a wrong way to do it.
So my sister and I inherited a family home here about 9 years ago. It's a cottage up on a lake up in Greenville. It's becoming a lot of work for her and I to manage because, excuse me, because there are so many improvements that need to be made to the property. We own it free and clear. It was bought back in 2001, 4 days before 9/11 hit. And I'm sure it has definitely, doubled its value. However, the condition of it needs major improvements. What would be your suggested best way to, if we wanted to continue to hold on to it, to utilize that property to make those improvements? Would you recommend a HELOC? Would you recommend a refi out? I mean, I'd eventually like to kind of turn it into a year-round Airbnb. Unfortunately, parts of it are not conducive to winter living because there's no heat source, so we have to shut everything down on the exterior and you live in the interior. So I'd like to make it something where it could be Airbnb or vacation home in the summer, but maybe a long-term rental for a local hospital or something for, in the off season. So what would you suggest would be the best way to approach that?
Do you rent it out now?
We did rent it out briefly to a couple for long-term, but just once or twice. Like I said, it's kind of, we use it still, so it's been very hard for us to separate it as a rental and a family place.
Are there other short-term rentals on this lake?
I'm sure there are. I'm not sure. There's not a ton that I'm aware of, but I've never really looked into it. It's a chain of 5 lakes, so.
So one of the number one rules when it comes to short-term renting is it a cleanable year-round building? And some of the things that you said are kind of concerning. You make most of your money in the edge seasons in short-term rental. You cover your costs in the summer. You really make the margin on the edge seasons. And if you can't have people who are begging to spend Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, a winter break at your property in the winter, and you got to kind of shut half the property down, I'm not sure if that would fit into, what I would call a good short-term rental.
But if we wanted to take the money that, like I said, it's owned free and clear, so if we wanted to take money to make the improvements, to make it more attractive on the.
Do you have a dollar amount in mind of how many,
How much I think it's worth?
For how much the improvements that you think you would need to make it a cleanable, year-round space?
Probably about $100,000.
So the epitome of a short-term rental, and if you guys can picture bell curves, and along the bottom it's price, and it starts at about $150,000, and it goes all the way up to $500,000. The top of that bell curve is a $250,000 property, okay? And as you work your way up the side of that bell curve, the very bottom of the rung would be a 7-year return on investment. The very top is a 5-year return on investment. So the holy grail of a short-term rental is a $250,000 property with a 5-year return on investment, okay? So that's gross rents. If you buy a $250,000 property, you should be expecting to get $50,000 a year back in gross rents. If you owe nothing on this home and you could put $100,000 into it to make $40,000 to $50,000 a year in annual gross rents, you would be in that category of less than a 5-year, probably a 4-year return on investment, right? You get your money back. That would be one of the best short-term, possibilities that I would ever see. Now, there's a long discussion behind that of, is the lake gonna shut you down? Are your neighbors gonna shut you down? Is the
Neighbors
count?
are assholes.
Is the county against short-term rentals?
No.
Are you in any type of an association? It starts to get layered as into what are your bylaws? And so the numbers may make sense, but you still need to unpack all of that.
The idea for us, I think, is more to maybe do it in the short term. We'd like to keep it as long as possible in the family. Our kids are all reaching that age that, they're either graduating from high school, from college and stuff, so we're hitting that lull of, so it's like, what can we do to fill it in that meantime to keep it as a long-term investment? So, well, thank you.
Other questions?
I could start singing, but it's not pretty.
Hi, I have two very different questions. One is, can you talk about investors, people that you bring in? I know we've talked about partners and stuff, but we haven't really specifically talked about finding investors, people who have money and don't know what to do with it, which is, tough problem. But and then part two is a very different question. Have you ever considered building to make money? So.
I guess we could probably all touch on investors. So investors, usually I gravitate towards family, friends, close real estate agents that I know. Everybody who had their hand up, who owns more than 5 rentals, they're great people for you to ask on to invest. It's hard to put your money in places right now in this market, at the top of the seller's market. If somebody's got the idea and the wherewithal to look at the numbers, those are the people that I trust. I never would go hard money lending. I would never invite a shark of an investor into my family's portfolio, and if I don't keep up my end of the deal, they're gonna take things from me. That scares me. So my investors are usually people that I know.
That's the same for me. It's been other investors that I know, friends, family, people that I trust. I haven't used hard money and don't intend on it. And I do also think, Jason touched on using a HELOC before. Personally, what I've done for somebody who was flipping, who purchased the house cash, and they just needed funds for the repairs, I've been able to draw on my HELOC, and they said, hey, within 3 months, you'll have your money back, and we sign a note, and there's a mortgage and everything like that. So there's probably just people that have access to money through other rental properties or a HELOC.
I don't invite investors into my nest. But that surprises nobody in the room at this point.
Yeah, your second question about building is an interesting one, because we're in an interesting time right now. Getting quotes for new builds is like mind-blowing. The price per square foot is, like, if you could find a builder under $180 a square foot for just a normal home, you're doing really good. And it used to be around 100, 120 6 years ago when I started. So I've watched that go up. Building, are you talking about just a house, or building a short-term rental, or building an investment property?
Any of those.
We are representing clients building short-term rentals. And it is an extremely deferred gratification. I mean, they're looking at 20 years down the road. Yes, that's their retirement. But the upfront costs of actually doing that right now in this market where there's not a lot of builders, I find that it's just a little bit more cost effective to find something that needs some updates than build brand new.
Mm-hmm. What about building to flip, essentially? So building it to sell it?
Like spec homes?
Sure.
I mean, the big players have really taken over Grand Rapids. They own the land, they own the lots. The builders that do 1 to 2 a year, I don't know how they do it. You know, they build a $300,000 home and they sell it for $50,000 more than what they have into it, and then they pay realtors and they pay other fees, and they walk away with $35,000. I don't think building is a get rich quick by any means type scenario in this market where lumber's, I was just telling Greg this last week, is 90% to where it was at the highest during COVID last week. And so we just have major supply chain issues. Getting into building right now seems really risky unless you're Tibby, Allen Edwin, Eastbrook, Eagle Creek. They have systems in place and they have labor.
Questions?
Something that I did, I have self-directed IRA also, Jeff, and something I've used many times is friends and family do private mortgages for me, not for flips, but long-term rentals, holds, other properties that I've actually resold on contract, but they're in a first position loan. I'm paying most of those people 5 or 6%, so while it's more than market, it's very easily accessible money. And, at one point in time, my mother had, 6 figures sitting in a checking account that was paying, 0.4%. And so, I don't want to make any more. So eventually I ended up getting, a couple $100,000 mortgage on my mom or something. So if you're looking for alternative financing, that is an option where there's a lot of folks that are, sitting on some cash, getting a very poor return, and it can be secured by a first position real estate, private mortgage.
Paul?
Where am I headed?
Right up front.
Oh, Steve.
Hi, I just want to add on to your question about Airbnbs. My husband and I, we have had one for 5 years. When we first got it, it was sort of like we just need a family second home. And then now we are kind of thinking this should be like a business. But anyway, I think the biggest thing when you're looking at short-term rentals is really how easy it is to get help. Like, you are not there, especially if it's far. You need people to manage it, and that can really break you. And in some cities, like if you are in like Traverse City, big cities like that, it's easy to find help. If you're like in a little town in the middle of nowhere, it is so hard. And that makes it so hard to manage it, Like people rent because of reviews. And if you don't have good housekeepers, if they don't do a good job, you don't get good reviews, it's bad. And then the other thing I would say is, there are some areas where you can get, like how, Jason was saying, you have the summer months, you're gonna get income in the summer, right? But then like after summer, then what? There are some areas where you have skiing, like Boyne Falls, some areas where people will go skiing, but it's not, it's not like Colorado, but it's like small mountains or whatever. We are lucky enough to be in an area like that. So, while you're not gonna get like a full block of the winter months where people are renting all the time, you can get weekends, you can get the holidays, and that really, really helps with that income. So I think that's another really big thing to think about. And then the bylaws really go with every city. It's different with every single city. So before you buy, you really want to look at what the city, their rules for that city are. For example, if you are like, say, in Elk Rapids, you cannot do rentals. They have like a minimum number of, we can only give 20, 60 permits, and that's it. And if they are over, you are in like you're waiting. But if you just go a little bit out of Elk Rapids, you can do it. Your address might still say Elk Rapids, but if you're not within city limits, you can do it. So you really want to do your homework. Make sure where exactly is the property, what am I allowed to do, and what am I not allowed to do before you buy a property, for sure.
I like what you brought up on the Elk Rapids thing. There's a line right there that I think causes a lot of fear. So you buy a property in Elk Rapids, and you get shut down 2 years later, and you just spent a lot of money building a business, and you're going, man, I got to sell this thing, and that's not what I wanted to do. Or you're just outside that municipal line, and you get to run it forever. We have horror stories of real estate agents who have either bought Airbnbs and the association shut them down the second that they closed on the home, and they had no idea that it was going on, or have bought Airbnbs, and this may not seem detrimental, but the association said, hey, you know what? You're going to short-term rent this. We didn't have a rule before, 7-day minimum. That doesn't seem like it's going to break the whole, game. But I think Justin could probably make a spreadsheet for us that would crush your Airbnb business. Who is going to go up to Northern Michigan on a wine tour, let's go hit Leelanau a couple days in a row, but spend $3,000 to stay the whole week? They're only going up there for 2 to 3 nights. And so there's little things like the homework that you have to do is unending, and it is not complete. There are still going to be cases where Airbnbs get shut down, but there's a lot going on with Airbnb and short-term rental rights right now in the state, at the state level, which is encouraging and could probably ease some of your fears.
With Airbnbs, did you ever consider doing Airbnbs out of state? We've got friends that just opened one on the Yellowstone River in Montana. And is that anything you guys ever considered?
No.
I've thought about it. I've looked. I know the Tennessee Smoky Mountains have cool Airbnbs. Down in Florida, there's quite a few. If I were to do something like that, I would need to have a partner or a company that I've vetted very thoroughly that would run something like that. But I wouldn't just buy down south in Florida and hope I could figure it out afterwards.
I would definitely buy out of state and build a portfolio in that way. Right now, I'm not sure if it's the wisest time. But like we were saying, 180 some days is kind of that. That's that number that you need to hit. So for a half a year, you would own a property out of state that no one's using. I would only really purchase something that I would want to go to personally and enjoy with family and friends, or allow family and friends to enjoy. So it'd probably be somewhere warmer, personally.
Hey, Jeff. Actually, I got 2 questions, and the first one is going to be for Jeff. Hey, Jeff. So you mentioned when you first got started, right? Can you refresh my memory on you and your wife's first investment? What exactly was that again?
We bought a 2-family unit at 136, 138 Carlton Southeast, which is right next to Aquinas College. Okay. And we lived in half and rented half.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Okay, so here's the second question for everybody. So talking about somebody who actually, I have 3 questions. Now I have 2 questions. All right, so here's the second question. When we're talking about capital gains, right, have you guys ran into that problem? And I know that, I've heard of some people doing something like, they would purchase the property, a single family, whatever it might be, live in it for a couple years, and then I think that after that time, then they don't have to pay capital gains, and then they purchase another one, and then they continue that cycle. I guess, have you guys ran into that dilemma, and have you guys figured out have you guys practiced that strategy, or maybe perhaps some other strategies to alleviate those capital gains tax?
Well, the best way to avoid capital gains is to do a 1031 exchange. So if we wanted to sell the place on Carlton, which would sell in a nanosecond in this market, we could do a 1031 exchange. We would just have to buy another piece of real estate. Then we defer all the capital gains. But I think the best person to answer this question is this guy right here.
Yeah, Jeff hit the nail on the head. It's the 1031 exchange. What you would need to do is if you sell that property, there's a certain time frame when you would identify your replacement property, and then there's another time frame which you have to actually close on that. And you would essentially roll your gain from property 1 into property 2, and you wouldn't have to pay any capital gains tax on that.
The time frame is 45 days to identify and 6 months to close. Got a question back there.
Can you take and roll it into more than one property? So if you have high equity position in one, can you roll it into 2 or 3?
Yes, you can.
It's a max of 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
right
a max
now.
of 3, Dave?
Max of 3.
Max of 3 properties.
And doesn't it have to be a more expensive property than the one you sold?
Equal to, all 3 have to be equal to the price that you sold the one for.
Or more.
Or greater.
Or greater.
Is there any type of like reverse 1031 exchange where if you were to purchase a property first and then sell your previous or another investment property to replenish the cash that you used to purchase that investment property? Is there any type of thing that's available like that?
Not that I'm aware of.
There is. It's
Is there?
hard.
Okay.
Just get a really, really good accountant, a 1031 specialist. But you can do a reverse, you just gotta do your homework.
In normally the rules on the 1031 is you would use a qualified intermediary, and then they have the funds. So the second that the proceeds from the sale touch your account, then the genie's kind of out of the bottle with that. So if you use a good qualified intermediary, they can facilitate that whole transaction for you.
There's a company here in town called, I think it's Mortgage Exchange.
Equity exchange.
Equity Exchange. Margaret?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, you might know more. I know the 1031 exchange has come under attack at like a federal level. Do you know any more about that? I mean, I figure you're closer to it.
Everything's coming under.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything one way or the other. I do know that it's kind of been under attack for the last decade or so. I've heard them threatening to take it away or to put a cap on it, but right now I don't know anything about that.
All right, Kelly, here you go.
I was wondering, do any of you specialize in sort of mid-term rentals, or have you dabbled in that at all? Not the short term where it's 1 to 2 days for Airbnb, not a typical 1-year lease, but like the 3-month, 6-month kind of corporate short-term rentals, or as people are transitioning between buying and selling, and what's your experience been with that?
I've researched it. It's a really intriguing investment right now, where people are, the return on investment numbers are absolutely insane. I think when you look at the investment though, and you're looking at the deferred gratification of the appreciation and the consistent cash flowing, it seems a little risky to have some high vacancy there, but then some very high paying people who are homeless, who need a place to stay until they can sell their home and then get one under contract and then buy one. I mean, they're paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month on something that's typically a $2,000 a month rental. I don't know anybody doing it, and yet there's clearly a market for it because there are people who can't transition smoothly into their next housing.
I've seen it for people that have Airbnbs where the 5 months during the summer they make the majority of their money, and then they may do a 3 or 6 month lease through the winter. And I've seen like traveling nurses or something like that where they're in town for a 3 to 6 month contract and they're looking for a furnished place. But I haven't looked into it personally, no.
Thank you. Jeff? I know you do some with luxury condos, right?
I have a couple high-end condos. We have somebody in one of my units right now, and they're paying $3,300 a month, and they're a 6-month lease while they build their house.
Where's your condo located that you're renting for that much?
It's located in Walker.
Could you repeat her question?
She asked where the condo was located that I was renting for $3,300. It's located in Walker, Michigan, northwest Grand Rapids area.
Jeff Blahnik, so northwest.
I do think, as these guys have said, I think there's a very strong market for anybody that wants to rent to people that are in the process of building. I mean, I think there's a huge market for that because there are plenty of people that want to build, and it is getting to be a 6, 7, 8 month process to build a nice home these days because of supply chain issues, and I think there's a real sweet market there where you're going to get a premium rent.
And would your strategy be to mail this property out to all the builders out there saying this is available if you've got people on the fence, or how would you market that?
I think the easiest way to market it is do it on the real estate web page, the Facebook page for realtors. I've got a rental available for 8 months. You got somebody building that needs a spot, you probably fill it in a week.
Is that condo furnished, Jeff?
No, it is not.
All right, I'm going to ask these guys to just give a couple of final thoughts, and then we will call it. Jason?
If you don't own a second home, I highly encourage talking to your loan officer, running numbers, and looking at buying a second home up north that you turn into a short-term rental that covers its costs, that cash flows positively, that allows you to invest in real estate. It's just to not have that, to not take the opportunity for something that's like 10% down on a second home. And on our first one, we got our entire family involved, okay? I didn't have 10% 4 years ago on a $200,000 property. But mom and dad and brothers and sisters and everyone did. And it was a family thing that you got to watch grow together. And that's okay. You don't need to do this all by yourself. There's a way to start that investing in your 401k, in your wealth, that's very affordable, that is leveraging, but not really scary. When you talk to Justin or your accountant or your financial advisor to just get started, I'd highly encourage doing that, even in this market, even at the high prices.
Yeah, I would echo what Jason says, and I would just say, get started now. Try to budget, try to save as much money as you can. If you don't have funds available right now, try to partner with somebody who does. Maybe you can provide sweat equity. Maybe you can be the person who manages tenants. There's something that you can bring to the table to get started now. And that's one thing that I wish I had done myself, was get started when I was thinking about it and when I was too scared, because it's limitless.
Okay, a couple quick hit thoughts on the way out here. If you want to get into investing, some of you may need to do a complete reset of your mindset regarding money. And I'm talking about learning and deciding to live way within your means so you have some money to invest. Being intentional with your money. There's a guy named Dave Ramsey. I don't like everything Dave says, but much of what he says I do like. One of the first things you need to do is do a financial statement. Take out a simple piece of paper, write down what you own, what you have in the bank, what are your assets, what are your liabilities. And every year, refresh your financial statement. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. If I were going to try to compare myself to Doug DeVos, well, I might as well just give up. The only person you compare yourself is yourself. Don't compare yourself to me or Jason or anybody else. Compare yourself to yourself. The goal is go a step forward every year. Build wealth every year. And it's a process. It's like the snowball that starts to go downhill. First, it's a little snowball. And by the time it gets down to the hill, it's this monster. And I started with a little snowball called Carlton. I have a nice sized snowball going downhill. And with any luck, the river doesn't rise, I'll have a monster someday. But it isn't rocket science. It is the math you knew in the third grade, and you just have to get started.
Thank you, everybody. I am hopeful that there was something in here, some little bite, some little piece that will impact you as you go forward. You know, you are in this business and you have opportunities that you've helped others accumulate over the years. And I'm hopeful that each of you can find a way to accumulate something for your family that will make a difference when you get to be my age. And so, you know, one of the things I wanted to mention, Jeff did not bring it up, but I've seen Jeff buy several properties, and you know, you go, how do you find properties in this market? Well, every now and then you get a listing and the deal falls through. Well, Mr. Blahnik over here, when the deal falls through, he now knows his seller has just gone on the record for what they'll take, right? So he knows exactly what the dollars are, and he says, if I can get you an offer that matches that, which means now he can use his commission to help in that purchase. I'm not sure how many you've bought that way, but I'm aware of at least 3 or 4 maybe that you've bought that way.
I've bought a few that way. You know, and when the transaction blows up and they have their sights set on getting moved or their next house or a retirement community, whatever it might be, you know, if they're comfortable with the net dollar that they were comfortable with, you know, I'm not taking advantage of them, I'm solving a problem for them. We're not going back on the market, they're not worried about inspections again. You know, and one of the things that I do when I buy, a simple little rule for myself, I look for as maintenance-free exterior as I can get. I don't want a house that's framed that you gotta paint. I want aluminum vinyl brick. Just saves you a whole boatload of money on maintenance.
I would also caution you to jump in front on a situation and where somebody calls you out, they're naive or they're not knowledgeable in the real estate field. And you have to remember that they called you out to help them get top dollar, not to help you build your investment portfolio. And so just make sure that you use that integrity in those moments when because you know, you've got this combination of you want to invest, you want to accumulate, but also you don't want to confuse and conflate that at that moment. And we've seen this happen over the years where somebody took advantage and it did come back and haunt that person because the family did get involved after the fact. So, and again, most of you may never see that in your lifetime. I mean, I've never gone out to a house where the seller basically said, you tell me, what do you want to, you know, I'll do it for whatever you say I should do it for. And there's this, or they'll say something like, I just want to get 30,000. I'd be happy if I got 30,000. Well, no. You guys are there to represent, to help these people.
Get the best return.
What's that?
Get the best return.
Get the best return for those people. So I just wanted to throw it in there as something that we have seen when you are out there and you're kind of looking across the scene and trying to find something, and all of a sudden something like this drops in your lap and it's like, no, you don't want to go there. So I will be excited to hear at the end of the year, and I hope that each one of you that do something will write me a note and just say, hey, you know what? We bought our first place, we bought our first or second place, I've got an Airbnb, I'm in the game, and we're working on building wealth so that you can retire, and you can retire well. And that's really our hope for all of you, is that you can all, and you know what, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I started when I was 22, and I'm now 66. I just got my first Social Security check last week. Thought I'd never see that, guys. I remember sitting with my buddies when we were in our 30s going, we'll never see this. Well, I just saw one. And so maybe it'll be there for you as well someday. But I would not think about that in terms of that's gonna change your life. because it's not that much money. So anyway, best wishes to all of you, and let's have a great 2022. And thank you to all of you at the panel here.